Guys, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can take a simple portrait and add a rain-soaked glass overlay, so you can give the impression that your model is looking through a rain-soaked window. And I want to take this technique further, and I'm also going to show you how to create this overlay so you can use it on your own photos, and also how to add some reflections. It's going to add depth in that. And then I'm taking this image further, converted it to black and white, and just added a little bit of extra grunge there on top. So let's have a look at how to do this in Photoshop. All right, so on the screen now, I've got my original portrait, and the first thing I want to do is add my rain-soaked glass overlay. So I go to File, Place Embedded, and then you want to scroll to the folder that your glass overlay is located, and here it is here. So basically, when you're creating your own glass overlay, what you need is something like a sheet of glass, and you can have you can maybe go to a second-hand dealer and get an old glass window for not a lot of money. And what you want to do is make sure that you shoot this against a black background. It's critical that you use a black background, because you'll see that the technique that we use to create this overlay needs to be black. So you can see that I've got here my window here mounted on a frame, and basically I've got my black background, and what I've done is created a side light basically in front of the window to create a little bit of flare and also to highlight the little water droplets. So what I'm doing is the assistant there is adding a fine mist across the window, and we did this several times. So I've got lots and lots of different frames, some without the water running, some are with just a fine mist, and I've also got some that have just dust on the glass, which can also be used for other applications. So that's how the frame that you'll end up with. And the other thing that you want to do to reduce the effect of reflections, because when you shoot this, if you shoot this in a normal room and you've got windows, they're all going to reflect in the glass. So you'll need to create a black backdrop behind you, or shoot this have something to cut the reflection. So the best way to do this is I've got a large black cutter behind me that reduces any or removes any of the reflections, and then I've just got the light coming from camera right across to pick up all these little water droplets. I've also used 2 softboxes to light my set overall, and my settings for this setup are ISO 100 f14 at 1/200th of a second. So that's basically the f14 will eliminate any ambient light in the frame, and so I've just got a black background. The octabox is adding the highlight across the glass so that I can see the little water droplets. You could easily do the same setup if you wanted to create an overlay. You don't need the actual 2 softboxes. You could use daylight with the black cutter behind you and just bring in some sort of light across the glass so that you get those highlights. So here is my glass overlay, and what I want to do first is just resize it. So I'm just grabbing onto the handles there at the side and just resizing that there. Once I'm happy with that, I want to check yes, tick yes, and then there it is. Now I'm going to change my blend mode from normal to screen, and you can see that just like magic, it now looks like the model is placed behind glass. And so what I've said by using the changing the blend mode to screen from normal is I'm telling Photoshop that I want you to hide anything that's black and reveal anything that's white. And so that's why it's really important that you add a little bit of extra light to just increase those highlights and it show up the water droplets a little bit better. So once I've got that, I can leave it at that, and I'm happy with that. If I want to, I can come along and also just add a layer mask to the glass. And if I want, I can come in with a white brush, and I'll just make sure I've got a nice soft brush selected. Blend mode normal, opacity 100%, get your flow down to around 10. And I can just come in and wherever I brush with black, will remove any water droplets there off the face. So it'll remove any of the overlay there. So if you just want to make it less obvious in certain areas, you can just do a little bit of dodging there with a layer brush just to clean up the face. I'll just show you here on this part of the screen. You can see what that does. It just removes it. And if I want to bring it back, I just switch back to white and that brings it back. Now, if layer masks, if you're not sure about that, there is some great tutorials that start with the basics of using layer masks and how they work, so you can check those out. So I've got that. And it's as simple as that. You can use that as a simple overlay, fantastic for senior portraits if you're doing them, or somewhat for lifestyle shoots, or even I used this technique for a commercial shoot for a poster, and they needed the model behind glass, and it's actually really difficult to light everything so that it looks good in one set. So we opted to do it the glass separately so that they could lay it over the top of the artwork at the end. So really handy to have a whole set of these for those such situations. So next thing I want to do to make this image look a bit more realistic is place a reflection, because you'll notice even when I was filming the creation of this overlay that you can see that the entire room is reflected on the glass, and so you need to have some sort of something reflecting on the glass to make it look realistic. So I'm going to put something on there now. So again, file, place embedded, and I've got my image selected here, and I'm going to place it on top of the image. Now, when you work with file, place embedded, rather than dropping and dragging each layer across, is file, place embedded drops it on as a smart object, which means I can edit all of these layers individually and come back later on and adjust the layers, and I don't, it's all non-destructive. So it's a good way to work with layers, to work with them as a smart object as opposed to having them on as a layer on its own. So here is my reflection layer, and I can just go ahead and change that to screen, and you can see that already it's looking pretty good. But there's something that I need to do first. When something is reflected, it's actually backwards. So I need to flip this so that it looks like it is a reflection. So you can see that you can read the writing here. So what I'm going to do is go to Edit, Free Transform, and Flip Horizontal. And now I've got a mirror image. You can see it's now reversed. And so what I'm going to do is change the blend mode to screen. And now I just want to position my background. So I'm actually just going to use this building here in the background, and I want to make sure that it's on my model's face here. So I'm just going to stretch it out a bit more. There we go. And even a little bit more. Something like that looks good. I'll just drop it down a little bit and hit OK. Okay, now you can see that the reflection, couple of things about the reflection, it's a little bit sharp, so it now looks like a reflection because I've reversed it, but you don't usually see reflections looking this sharp. So what I'm going to do is filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and give that about 10 pixels should be enough. Let's have a look so we can see before and after. That's looking all right. And then what I want to do is just lower the opacity a little bit so that I can now see my raindrops coming in. So I'm just going to drop that lower and lower and lower. And I think somewhere around there. So you can play around with whatever you think looks good. You don't want it to be perfectly clear on the face. You want to see some of those reflections, but you don't want so much that it actually obscures your model. So you just might need to tweak, and it's going to depend on the background. But I think something around there looks good. Now, what I'm going to do is just adjust the levels a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is a new adjustment layer, and I want my adjustment layer to only affect the layer directly underneath, which is my reflection layer. I don't want it to adjust the levels on any of the other layers. So to do this, what you want to do is hover your mouse between the two layers and then hit Option on a Mac, Alt on a Windows, and you can see the arrow pointing down now, and just hit that click. And now I've told Photoshop that I'm adjusting the levels just on the layer directly underneath. So what I'll do is I'll just bring this back up to 50 and I'll turn off the layers underneath so you can see exactly what's happening. So we know that this is in screen mode and it's saying to Photoshop, just show me the highlights. So what I can do is just to minimize the effect of that reflection a little more is just increase the blacks. And I'm doing that by using an levels adjustment layer and just pulling from the left-hand side in. And basically what I'm doing is crunching up the blacks a little bit. And so that, if I come back and turn on my other layers, you can see that just doing that is just darkening it a little bit, and it just makes it a little bit clearer on the face there. And now what I can do is just come back to my reflection layer, and I'm just going to drop the opacity a little bit. I want to just bring back the detail in the rain. All right, so far that's looking good. All right, so I'm happy with that, but I want to highlight a little bit more of this rain area. So the best way to do this, I've found, is to add a layer mask here to the reflection, and I can also remove some reflections off the face if I need to. But what I'm going to do is add a graduated filter so that the background will fall off at the edges so that I'm seeing more of the rain-soaked window. So what I'm going to do is, with my layer mask selected, just come across, and I've got my from white to black selected as a gradient, and I'm just going to come across, and you can see that what I've done is the gradient, you can see it here in the layer mask, is I'm showing this part of the reflection and hiding it, and it fades off as the image fades off to the side here. So I can make that a little bit more. I can just bring that line a little bit longer here, and now I'm just seeing a little bit more, and I can try just seeing a little bit more. So you can see that when I disable the layer mask, the reflection goes across the entire image, and when I enable that layer mask, you can see that that graduated filter just allows me to show a bit more of that rain-soaked window. Just going to try one more time. I just want to get it to about a little bit more. About there, that looks all right. All right, so that looks good. and levels look good. Now, once you adjust the levels, what happens is you also adjust the saturation. So I want to just address that and do a hue saturation adjustment layer. Just drop the saturation. Make sure that it's also clipped. So again, hitting the Option on a Mac, Alt on a Windows, and I'm just saying, hey, Photoshop, I just want to adjust the hue saturation on this layer, not the other layers. And just click on that icon, just drop the saturation a little bit so it doesn't look so strong and overpowering. And I'm pretty happy with that. I could leave it at that, but I want it to give it a more classic look. So what I'm going to do is just add a black and white adjustment layer. And I think that looks a lot more classic in black and white. So I'm pretty happy with that. I can tweak around with the reds a little bit. That's looking good. And then couple of final steps. So what I'm going to do is take all these layers that I've created and pop them all up onto their own layer. So that's Command, Option, Alt on a Windows, Shift E. And now all those layers have now been combined and into their own layer here. And what I want to do, the best way to finish off an image is to go Filter, Camera Raw, and you get a little dialog box that looks just like Lightroom. And I'm just going to tweak my blacks a little bit, just give it a bit more edge. And the one that I really like here, because I've got all these little fine details on the top of my glass, is just increase the texture a little bit. And it just really handles the texture nicely without ruining the skin tone. So about there, I might give it a titch of clarity and just up the contrast a little bit. And I'm happy with that. Hit OK. And there's before, there's after. So it's just added a bit more edge to the shot. And I can finish that, just one more thing. So I'm just going to duplicate that layer, Command J, is I can come in and add a little bit of noise. So Filter, Noise, Add Noise, and you can just see if I toggle on and off, before and after, I've added about 4.8% noise there, and that just finishes it off and gives it that sort of old world sort of retro look to the image. So there we are. We've got before and after, and that's the rain-soaked window overlay with a reflection.